I am Laura Wilson, 34 years old, and until yesterday I was the Senior Compliance Certification Specialist at Meditech Solutions. 5 years of dedication ended when our new CEO publicly humiliated me during a company-wide meeting, calling my name first on his layoff list. What he failed to realize was that my signature was the only one keeping our flagship product legally operational. By following protocol and filing a status change with regulators, I accidentally triggered a corporate emergency, costing $101,000 every hour. Before I continue my story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more corporate revenge stories that will make your jaw drop. The morning of that fateful day started like any other. I arrived at the gleaming Meditech Solutions building in downtown San Francisco at 7:30, clutching my travel mug filled with hazelnut coffee. The security guard Walter greeted me with his usual friendly nod as I swiped my badge and headed to the elevators. "Another early start, Laura?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Always," I replied with a smile. "Those compliance reports won't file themselves." That was my life for 5 years. I had built a reputation as the go-to person for anything related to regulatory compliance for medical software. It might sound boring to some, but in the healthcare technology industry, compliance isn't just important, it is absolutely critical. One mistake could mean patients receiving incorrect medication dosages, or doctors making decisions based on faulty data. My role at Meditech was unique. I was the only person in our 300-person company who held the Advanced Medical Software Compliance Certification, or AMSCC. This special certification required 2 years of specialized training, passing 6 extremely difficult exams, and maintaining continuing education credits every year. The certification process was grueling, involving 1,000-page regulatory documents, practical demonstrations, and in-person evaluations by federal inspectors. But I loved the challenge. There was something deeply satisfying about ensuring that our products not only worked well, but were safe for patients and compliant with the complex web of healthcare regulations. My office walls displayed my framed certification, along with thank you letters from hospitals that used our software. One that I was particularly proud of came from a children's hospital in Boston, crediting our medication tracking system with preventing several potential medication errors. My colleagues respected my expertise, often stopping by my desk to ask questions about whether a new feature would pass compliance requirements. The development team leaders would invite me to their planning meetings early in the product cycle, knowing it was easier to build compliance in from the beginning rather than trying to fix issues later. Laura saved us at least 6 months of rework on the patient track module. Thomas Hayes, our lead developer, once told the department during a quarterly review. She caught a data storage issue that would have violated HIPAA regulations before we wrote a single line of code. Thomas became one of my closest allies at work. A brilliant software engineer with kind eyes and a patient demeanor, he valued my input even when other technical staff might have seen compliance as an obstacle to innovation. Rachel Bennett, a junior compliance specialist I had been mentoring, also became a good friend. Fresh out of graduate school, with a degree in health information systems, she was eager to learn the practical side of compliance work. We often had lunch together in the company cafeteria, where I would answer her questions and share stories from my early career mistakes. "I don't know how you keep all these regulations straight in your head," Rachel said to me one day over salads. "It is like you have the entire code of federal regulations memorized." I laughed. Trust me, I made plenty of mistakes learning all this, but after a while the patterns start to make sense. Outside of work, I would often meet up with my best friend Jessica Myers, who worked in the finance department. We had started at Meditech within months of each other, and bonded during new employee orientation. Jessica understood the corporate politics better than anyone else I knew, with an uncanny ability to predict leadership changes and company decisions. Everything at Meditech had been running smoothly until 6 months ago, when our longtime CEO Margaret Lawson retired. The board brought in Richard Parker as the new CEO, a businessman with a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting and maximizing shareholder value. He came from a consumer electronics company with none of the regulatory complexity of healthcare technology. From his first company-wide address, I had misgivings. "We need to move faster, break things if necessary, and worry less about red tape," he announced to the assembled staff. In the healthcare software industry, that red tape was what kept patients safe. At first, the changes were subtle. Meetings became more focused on revenue targets and less on quality metrics. The casual, collaborative atmosphere began to shift toward a more competitive environment. New managers from Richard's previous company started appearing in key positions, replacing longtime Meditech leaders. Despite the changing atmosphere, I remained focused on our biggest project of the year, the rollout of MediTrack 5.0, a comprehensive patient management system that had been in development for 18 months. As the certification holder, I had spent countless hours ensuring that every aspect of the system met the stringent requirements of the Healthcare Software Regulatory Commission. The project represented over $40 million in development costs and projected annual revenue of over $100 million. Hospitals across the country had already signed contracts contingent on the system receiving regulatory approval. My signature on the compliance certification was the final step needed before the nationwide rollout scheduled for the following month. The night before everything fell apart, I stayed late, finalizing the certification documentation. As I packed up my things around 9:30, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. After all the hard work and late nights, MediTrack 5.0 was ready to help healthcare providers across the country deliver better patient care. Little did I know that my dedication was about to be rewarded in the cruelest way possible. The first sign that something was off came about 2 weeks before the layoff. I had sent an email to Richard requesting his review of the final certification documentation, as was standard procedure for major product releases. In previous launches, our former CEO, Margaret, would carefully review these documents, understanding their importance. But days passed with no response from Richard. When I followed up with his executive assistant, Stephanie, she seemed uncomfortable. "Richard is very busy with strategic planning right now," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Perhaps you could send the documents to Amanda in HR instead." This made no sense. Why would human resources need to review technical compliance documentation? I mentioned this strange interaction to Thomas during our coffee break. "Something weird is happening," Thomas confirmed, lowering his voice, though we were alone in the break room. "There have been closed-door meetings all week with the new executive team. And did you notice half the engineering department was left off the distribution list for the quarterly planning meeting?" Rachel had noticed changes too. "They moved my desk yesterday," she told me. "Now I'm sitting with the customer service team instead of the compliance group." When I asked why, my manager just said it was a temporary space adjustment but couldn't tell me when I'd move back. The following day, I discovered I had been removed from several email threads discussing the final testing stages of MediTrack 5.0. When I asked my direct manager, Kevin Sullivan, about this, he seemed nervous. "It must be an administrative error," he said, shuffling papers on his desk. "I'll look into it." But he never did. Instead, I noticed Kevin started avoiding me in the hallways. Once I saw him duck into a conference room when he spotted me approaching. Kevin had always been supportive of my work, even advocating for my promotion last year. His sudden change in behavior was concerning. That evening, I called Jessica, who had been out of the office on a business trip. "I'm getting a really bad feeling about what's happening at work," I told her, pacing around my apartment. "It is like I'm being frozen out, but no one will tell me why." Jessica was silent for a moment. "Laura, I wasn't supposed to tell anyone this, but I overheard something in the finance department. They're preparing for a significant restructuring. The board approved it last week." "Restructuring? What does that mean exactly?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Layoffs," Jessica confirmed. "But it is supposed to be focused on reducing middle management. Your position is too specialized to be at risk." I wanted to believe her, but the knot in my stomach tightened. That night I could barely sleep. I pulled out my certification documentation and reviewed it for the 100th time. My name and professional license number appeared on every page, along with my personal attestation that the software met all regulatory requirements. The certification was tied to me personally, not just to my role at the company. This was standard practice in the industry to ensure accountability. The next morning, I decided to approach Brian Cooper, our chief financial officer. Brian had been with Meditech for over a decade and had always been straight with employees about company matters. "Do you have a minute, Brian?" I asked, catching him alone in the company kitchen. "For you, Laura. Always," he said, though I noticed the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Is something happening with the compliance department? I feel like I'm being kept out of important communications about MediTrack 5.0. Brian sighed deeply, and glanced around to ensure we were alone. Look, I can't say much, but attend the all-hands meeting tomorrow, and maybe update your resume. My heart sank. But what about the certification? I'm the only one who can sign off on it. A flash of confusion crossed his face. I'm sure Kevin has a plan for that, he said, though he didn't sound convinced. I have to go. We have an emergency finance meeting. That afternoon, I received a calendar invitation for an unscheduled all-company meeting the following morning at 10. The subject line simply read, Organizational Announcement. No agenda, no details. The meeting was marked as mandatory. I texted Thomas. Did you get the meeting invitation? His reply came seconds later. Yes. This doesn't look good. Rachel stopped by my desk later that afternoon, her face pale. My manager just asked me to document all my current projects and share access to all my files, she whispered. I think something big is happening tomorrow. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. I think so too. That evening, I stayed late again, making copies of all the compliance documentation for MediTrack 5.0. Something told me I might need it. As I was leaving, I ran into Kevin in the parking garage. For once, he couldn't avoid me. Kevin, what's going on? I asked directly. I know something's happening tomorrow and it involves me. Kevin looked miserable. Laura, I fought for you. I really did. But the decisions have been made at levels above me. What decisions? Am I being fired? I can't say anything more, he said, getting into his car. I'm sorry. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. How could they be considering letting me go right before the launch of our biggest product? Didn't they understand I was the only certified specialist who could sign off on MediTrack 5.0? I called Jessica as soon as I got home. I think I'm getting fired tomorrow, I said, my voice breaking. But it makes no sense. The certification for MediTrack is in my name. If I'm gone, who will handle the compliance requirements? Maybe they've found someone else with the certification, Jessica suggested. Impossible, I replied. I would know them. The certification community is small, and Meditech hasn't hired anyone new in compliance for over a year. As I hung up, an email notification appeared on my phone. It was the final meeting reminder for tomorrow morning's announcement. With a sense of impending doom, I set my alarm and tried to prepare myself for whatever was coming. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a navy blue pantsuit with a light blue blouse. If I was going to face bad news, I would do it with dignity. I arrived at the office 30 minutes early, hoping to speak with Kevin before the meeting, but his office was empty, his computer screen dark. By 9:50, employees were filing into the largest conference room, which could barely contain all 300 staff members. Those who couldn't find seats stood along the walls or spilled out into the hallway. The atmosphere was tense, with nervous whispers filling the room. Thomas saved me a seat near the back. Whatever happens, we're in this together, he whispered as I sat down. Rachel, seated across the aisle, gave me a worried smile. I noticed several executives I didn't recognize, seated in the front row, along with Amanda Davis, the new HR director who had joined the company shortly after Richard became CEO. At exactly 10 o'clock, Richard Parker strode into the room, followed by Amanda. The room fell silent immediately. Richard, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed at odds with our company's usually casual dress code, took his position at the front of the room. His expression was stern, almost smug. Good morning, everyone, he began, his voice echoing through the sound system. As you know, Meditech Solutions has been undergoing strategic changes over the past 6 months. Today, I'm announcing the next phase of our transformation. He paused, scanning the room. In order to streamline operations and maximize efficiency, we will be implementing a reduction in force effective immediately. A collective gasp filled the room. Though rumors had been circulating, hearing it confirmed was still shocking. Amanda will now read the list of affected positions, Richard continued, stepping aside. Amanda stepped forward, holding a tablet. When I call your name, please report to the HR conference room on the second floor to receive your separation package and turn in your company property. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear her next words. Laura Wilson, Senior Compliance Specialist. I froze. Even though I had suspected this might happen, hearing my name called first in front of all my colleagues sent a wave of shock through my body. Around me, I could hear murmurs of surprise. From the corner of my eye, I saw Thomas's face pale in shock. Amanda continued reading names, but I barely registered them. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. How could they let me go when I was the only certified specialist for MediTrack 5.0? After reading about 20 names, Amanda stopped and handed the floor back to Richard. Instead of showing compassion for those he had just fired, Richard launched into what sounded like a prepared speech, criticizing our performance. The individuals named have not demonstrated the level of excellence and commitment that Meditech requires moving forward, he stated coldly. In particular, we've identified significant inefficiencies in our compliance processes that have delayed product launches and cost the company millions. My face burned with anger and humiliation. My department had never delayed a product launch. In fact, we had prevented potential disasters that would have cost the company far more in regulatory fines and reputation damage. Security personnel will escort affected employees to collect their personal belongings, Richard continued. All company property must be turned in before leaving the premises. As if on cue, several security guards entered the room. One approached me, a young man named David, who had always greeted me warmly in the mornings. Now he couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Wilson," he said quietly. "I need to escort you to your desk, and then to HR." The walk to my desk felt like a death march. Colleagues stared as I passed, some with sympathy, others quickly averting their eyes. At my desk, I was given 5 minutes to gather personal items under David's watchful eye. Photos of family, my coffee mug, a few books. I numbly placed them in a cardboard box David provided. Rachel approached despite David's attempt to keep people away. "This is wrong," she whispered fiercely. "They can't do this to you." "Apparently they can," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. Thomas appeared moments later. "Laura, we need to talk about the certification for MediTrack," he began, but David stepped between us. "I'm sorry, sir. Miss Wilson is not permitted to discuss company business." Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. "I'll call you," he mouthed silently as David led me away. In the HR conference room, Amanda handed me a folder of termination documents with a practiced neutral expression. "Your position has been eliminated as part of our at-will employment policy," she recited mechanically. "This packet contains information about your final paycheck continuation of benefits and severance package." "Who will handle the compliance certification for MediTrack 5.0, I asked. "The launch is in 3 weeks, and I'm the only certified specialist." Amanda's expression flickered briefly. "That's no longer your concern. Kevin Sullivan has assured us that arrangements have been made." I knew this was impossible. Kevin couldn't simply transfer my certification to someone else. The regulatory body required formal processes for such changes. "You'll need to sign these documents acknowledging receipt," Amanda continued, pushing papers toward me. I signed where required, my hand shaking slightly. When she handed me my final paycheck, I noticed it included just 2 weeks of severance pay despite my 5 years with the company. "Is this all?" I asked, staring at the check. "Your performance reviews over the past quarter did not qualify you for the standard severance package," Amanda replied without emotion. This was another shock. My last review, conducted by Kevin just 3 months ago, had been excellent. Something was very wrong. David then escorted me to the front entrance where I surrendered my badge. Walter, the security guard who had greeted me warmly that morning, now looked uncomfortable as he accepted my access card. "Take care, Laura," he said quietly, as I walked out the glass doors for the last time. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and finally let the tears come. 5 years of dedication ended with public humiliation and a paltry severance check. I felt betrayed, angry, and confused. As I drove home through the San Francisco traffic, questions kept swirling in my mind. Why me? Why now, right before a major product launch? And what did Richard mean by inefficiencies in the compliance process? By the time I reached my apartment, my sadness had hardened into something else. Determination. This didn't make sense, and I needed to understand why it had happened. Little did I know the answers would come sooner than expected, along with an opportunity I never could have anticipated. Back in my apartment, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the termination papers. My phone had been buzzing with text messages from concerned colleagues, but I couldn't bring myself to read them yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into my personal email, hoping I could still access some work correspondence before my account was completely shut down. To my surprise, I still had access. HR must have forgotten to immediately disable my email in the chaos of firing 20 people at once. I quickly scanned recent messages, searching for any clues about why I had been targeted. There it was, an email thread between Richard and Amanda from 3 days ago that had accidentally included me, probably because someone had used reply all without checking the distribution list. The compliance position needs to be vacated by Friday, Richard had written. I already have someone lined up to take over. Make sure Wilson is on the list. Amanda's reply was equally disturbing. Are you sure about the timing? She's the certification holder for MediTrack 5.0. Richard's final response, Kevin says, we can handle the certification internally. It is just paperwork. Get it done. Just paperwork. My professional certification that had taken years to achieve was just paperwork to him. My blood boiled. But before I could search for more emails, my access was cut off. Someone in IT must have realized I still had login capabilities. My phone rang. It was Jessica. Laura, are you okay? I just heard what happened. I took a deep breath. No, I'm not okay. I was publicly fired for no reason, and I just found emails showing Richard had specifically targeted my position. That's awful, Jessica said, but I don't understand why he would fire you now with MediTrack 5.0 so close to launch. Everyone knows you're the only one certified to sign off on it. Her words triggered something in my mind. She was right. My certification was tied to me personally, not to Meditech. According to Healthcare Software Regulatory Commission guidelines, if a certified specialist leaves a company, the commission must be notified immediately. I pulled out my certification manual from my home office and flipped to the section on employment changes. There it was in black and white. Certificate holders must notify the commission within 24 hours of any change in employment status when that change affects their ability to oversee certified software products. Failure to do so may result in personal penalties and regulatory action against the certified products. My obligation was clear. As a certification holder, I had a professional and legal responsibility to notify the Regulatory Commission that I was no longer employed at Meditech and therefore no longer overseeing MediTrack 5.0. But would doing so hurt the company? Would it look like retaliation? I paced my apartment, wrestling with my conscience. This wasn't about revenge. It was about following proper regulatory procedures. Patient safety was at stake. The certification existed precisely to ensure that qualified professionals were overseeing critical healthcare software. After an hour of consideration, I made my decision. I would follow the rules as I always had. I sat down at my computer and drafted an email to the Healthcare Software Regulatory Commission, to whom it may concern. In accordance with HSRC Regulation 42.3.1, I am writing to inform you that, as of today, I am no longer employed by Meditech Solutions. As the certificate holder for MediTrack 5.0, certification number MS5 437892, I will no longer be overseeing the compliance aspects of this product. Sincerely, Laura Wilson, AMSCC, number 2847561. I read the email 3 times to ensure it contained only facts, no emotion or accusations. Then I hit send. To be thorough, I also completed the official status change form available on the Commission's website, providing details about the certification, the product, and my separation date. I attached my termination notice as proof of the employment change and submitted the form electronically. With those tasks completed, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had fulfilled my professional obligation. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. I finally checked my text messages. There were concerned notes from Rachel Thomas and several other colleagues. I replied to them briefly, thanking them for their support, but explaining that I wasn't ready to discuss details yet. Thomas had texted, "Call me as soon as possible. Something's not right with this whole situation." I responded, "Will call tomorrow. Need some time to process." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I ordered takeout but barely touched it. Instead, I spent hours updating my resume and searching job boards for compliance specialist positions. The job market for my specific certification was decent, but most opportunities would require relocating from San Francisco. As I prepared for bed, I wondered how Meditech planned to handle the certification issue. Did they really not understand the regulatory requirements, or did they have some plan I couldn't foresee? Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I fell into an exhausted sleep around midnight, emotionally drained from the day's events. My last thought before drifting off was that at least the worst was behind me. I couldn't have been more wrong. At exactly 6 in the morning, my phone rang, jolting me awake. The screen showed Thomas's number. "Hello," I answered groggily. Laura Thomas's voice was urgent. "You need to turn on your computer right now. All hell has broken loose at Meditech." "What's happening?" I asked, instantly alert as I reached for my laptop. "The Healthcare Software Regulatory Commission sent an emergency notice at 5 this morning." Thomas explained, his words tumbling out rapidly. "They've issued a stop work order on Meditrack 5.0. The entire project is frozen. No development, no testing, no implementation. Nothing can proceed until the certification issue is resolved." I sat up straight in bed. A stop work order. That's serious. "Serious doesn't begin to cover it," Thomas continued. "Brian Cooper just announced in an emergency meeting that the company is losing $101,000 every hour the project is delayed. The hospitals that were scheduled to implement Meditrack next month are threatening to cancel their contracts." My mind raced. The Regulatory Commission had acted with unusual speed. Typically, they took days or even weeks to process status changes. The Commission must have flagged Meditrack as high priority because of its widespread patient impact, I said, thinking aloud. They wouldn't want uncertified software controlling medication dispensing in hospitals across the country. "Richard is on a rampage," Thomas added. "He's demanding to know who notified the Commission. When Kevin explained that you were legally required to report your status change, Richard went ballistic. He's threatening lawsuits against you for corporate sabotage." I felt a chill. That's ridiculous. I just followed the regulations. Any certified specialist would be required to do the same. "We know that, but Richard doesn't understand how certification works. Or didn't until about an hour ago." I could hear the grim satisfaction in Thomas's voice. Now the board is involved, asking why he fired the only person who could keep the project on track. My phone beeped with an incoming call. "Thomas, I need to go. Someone else is calling." "It is probably HR," he said. "They're desperately trying to reach you." I switched calls. "Hello." Laura Wilson, a woman's voice I didn't recognize. "This is Patricia from Meditech Human Resources. Your presence is requested at the office immediately for an urgent meeting regarding your separation agreement." "My separation agreement was completed yesterday," I replied cautiously. "There have been developments that require further discussion," Patricia said, sounding uncomfortable. "A car has been dispatched to your address. It should arrive in approximately 20 minutes. Before I could respond, she continued, "The executive team and board members will be present. This is of the utmost importance to the company." My heart pounded. "I'll be ready," I said, then ended the call. I rushed to shower and dress, opting for my most confident outfit, a black suit with a red blouse. As I applied makeup, I tried to calm my nerves by reminding myself that I had done nothing wrong. I had simply followed regulatory requirements, as I always had throughout my career. The car arrived precisely on time. The driver, professionally courteous, said nothing about the situation as he drove me to the Meditech building. When we arrived, I was surprised to see Walter, the security guard, waiting for me at the entrance. "Miss Wilson," he said, handing me a visitor badge. "I'm to escort you directly to the boardroom on the top floor." The atmosphere in the building was tense. Employees stared as I walked past, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. News had clearly spread about the stop work order and my unexpected return. As we approached the executive floor, I saw Rachel in the hallway. She quickly approached despite Walter's attempt to keep our path clear. "They're panicking," she whispered. "No one else has your certification and the commission won't budge on the requirements." Walter gently but firmly directed me away from Rachel and toward the imposing double doors of the boardroom. "They're waiting for you," he said. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the doors. The boardroom was packed. The entire executive team sat along one side of the massive table. The board of directors occupied the other side. Richard Parker stood at the head of the table, his face flushed with anger. Kevin Sullivan sat looking miserable, while Amanda Davis furiously typed on her laptop. At the far end sat Michael Fitzgerald, the company's general counsel, reviewing documents with a concerned expression. Every head turned as I entered. Miss Wilson Diana Roberts, the board chairwoman, spoke first. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Before I could respond, Richard cut in. Let's not pretend this is a friendly meeting, he snapped. Miss Wilson deliberately sabotaged this company after her termination. Michael Fitzgerald looked up sharply. Mr. Parker, we agreed to approach this matter professionally. Richard ignored him. Do you have any idea what you've done? He demanded, glaring at me. You've jeopardized a $40 million project and potentially destroyed this company's reputation with every major hospital in the country. I remained standing just inside the doorway, my hands clasped in front of me, to hide their slight trembling. I followed the regulatory requirements that govern my professional certification, I said evenly. The Healthcare Software Regulatory Commission requires notification within 24 hours when a certificate holder changes employment status. You could have waited, Richard shouted, given us time to make arrangements. That would have violated federal regulations, I replied, maintaining my composure. As you stated yesterday, my employment was terminated effective immediately. The 24-hour notification period began at that moment. Brian Cooper cleared his throat. For clarity, the company is currently losing approximately $101,000 per hour due to the stop work order. Several hospital systems have already contacted us, threatening contract cancellation if we cannot resolve this issue within 72 hours. Diana Roberts turned to Kevin. Mr. Sullivan, you assured the board that compliance certification could be handled internally after Miss Wilson's departure. Please explain the current situation. Kevin looked pale. I misunderstood the certification requirements. I thought we could simply reassign the certification to someone else in the department. I didn't realize it was tied to Laura personally and required years of specialized training and examination. Richard's face darkened further. This is precisely the kind of bureaucratic nonsense I've been trying to eliminate from this company. It is just a signature on a form. It is not just a signature, I corrected him, my professional pride overcoming my nervousness. The certification represents years of specialized knowledge and personal accountability. The certificate holder is legally liable for ensuring patient safety in the software. That is why the Commission takes changes in oversight so seriously. Enough. Richard slammed his hand on the table. You deliberately waited until after your termination to create this crisis. You could have warned us about these requirements. With all due respect, sir, I replied. My team provided documentation about certification requirements multiple times over the past 6 months. I personally sent you 3 emails outlining the regulatory framework for MediTrack 5.0. They were never acknowledged. Several board members exchanged glances. Richard's face grew redder. This is clearly a case of malicious retaliation. We'll sue you for intentional interference with business relations. We'll make sure you never work in this industry again. At this point, Michael Fitzgerald stood up abruptly. Sir, stop, he exclaimed, grabbing Richard's arm. She's the only one who can fix this situation. Threatening her is not only inappropriate, it potentially constitutes workplace harassment and could expose the company to significant legal liability. The room fell silent. Richard stared at Michael in shock. Miss Wilson acted in accordance with her professional obligations, Michael continued firmly. Any certified specialist would be required to do the same. Threatening legal action against her for following federal regulations would be viewed very unfavorably by both the courts and the Regulatory Commission. Richard pulled his arm away from Michael's grasp, but remained silent, seething. Diana Roberts spoke into the tense silence. Miss Wilson, we apologize for this inappropriate approach. Clearly, there has been a significant misunderstanding about the certification requirements for MediTrack 5.0. The board would like to discuss potential solutions to this situation. I finally took a seat at the table, feeling the balance of power in the room shift. The Regulatory Commission has made it clear, Diana continued, that without a certified specialist overseeing the project, MediTrack 5.0 cannot proceed. As I understand it, you are the only person at Meditech with the necessary certification. That's correct, I confirmed. Rachel Bennett has begun the certification process, but she's still at least 18 months away from qualification. So you are the only one who can help us resolve this crisis, Diana stated plainly. For the first time since entering the room, I allowed myself a small smile. Yes, I believe I am. Michael Fitzgerald cleared his throat and addressed the room. For everyone's benefit, I'd like to clarify the legal situation we're facing. Miss Wilson was legally required to notify the Regulatory Commission of her employment status change. She did so in a professional manner, providing only factual information without commentary. There was no malice or sabotage involved. He turned to face Richard directly. Furthermore, any threats of litigation against Miss Wilson would be groundless and could expose Meditech to countersuit for wrongful termination and retaliation. Richard started to object, but Michael continued firmly. The facts are clear. Miss Wilson was terminated without cause after 5 years of excellent service directly before a major product launch that required her specialized certification. This timing suggests potential impropriety in the termination decision. Diana Roberts nodded gravely. Thank you for that clarification, Michael. She turned to Richard. Mr. Parker, perhaps you could explain why Miss Wilson was selected for termination, given her critical role in our flagship product launch. All eyes turned to Richard, whose composure was visibly cracking. He shuffled papers in front of him. Her position was identified as redundant in our organizational efficiency analysis. Kevin assured me that the compliance certification could be managed internally. Kevin looked like he wanted to disappear. I misunderstood the requirements. I thought the certification belonged to the company, not to Laura personally. That's not accurate, I interjected calmly. In our department meetings, I explained multiple times that my advanced medical software compliance certification was personally held and required specific handover procedures if I were to leave the company. Those procedures include a transition period of at least 60 days with the incoming certified specialist. A board member I recognized as James Matthews, a physician who had always advocated for stringent compliance standards, leaned forward. Do we have records of these meetings? Were these warnings documented? All compliance meetings are recorded and transcribed as part of our regulatory documentation process, I replied. The records would be in the compliance department's secure server. Diana turned to Amanda. Miss Davis, please have someone retrieve those meeting records immediately. Amanda nodded stiffly and stepped out of the room. Brian Cooper, who had been silently calculating on his tablet, spoke up. The financial impact of this situation cannot be overstated. Beyond the immediate losses of $101,000 per hour, we risk contract cancellations, totaling over $80 million, if we cannot resolve this within 3 days. Additionally, our stock price will likely suffer significant damage when this becomes public knowledge. Diana Roberts addressed me directly. Miss Wilson, what would be required to lift the stop work order? I straightened in my chair, aware that all attention was focused on me. The Regulatory Commission needs confirmation that a certified specialist is overseeing the MediTrack 5.0 project. That would be me, or someone else with equivalent certification. And there is no one else available, Diana asked. The certification is relatively rare, I explained. There might be 20 people in the country who hold it. Most are employed by competitor companies or by the Regulatory Commission itself. Finding someone negotiating their release from current employment and bringing them up to speed on our specific implementation would take months. The room fell silent as the reality of the situation sank in. So you're saying, Diana clarified, that reinstating you is the only viable solution to this crisis? Yes, I replied simply. At this point, Amanda returned to the room and whispered something to Diana, who nodded grimly. The meeting transcripts confirm Miss Wilson's account, Diana announced to the room. She explicitly warned about the certification requirements and the necessary transition procedures on at least 5 documented occasions over the past 3 months. Richard's face had gone from red to pale. This is absurd. We can't allow an employee to hold the company hostage. She's not an employee anymore, Michael pointed out dryly. You fired her. Now she's a certified specialist whose services we desperately need. Diana turned to me. Miss Wilson, would you be willing to help resolve this situation? This was the moment I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath. I would be willing to return to Meditech under certain conditions, I stated clearly. What conditions? Diana asked. First, I would require a new position as Director of Compliance, reporting directly to the board, rather than through normal management channels. This would ensure that compliance concerns are never again sidelined or ignored. Diana nodded. That seems reasonable. Second, a significant increase in compensation to reflect my specialized certification and the critical nature of my role. I'm thinking a base salary of $200,000 plus performance bonuses. Brian winced, but nodded. still cheaper than continuing to lose $101,000 every hour. Third, a written apology for the public manner of my termination to be distributed to all employees. Richard started to object, but Diana silenced him with a raised hand. Continue, Miss Wilson. Fourth, a guaranteed 2-year employment contract with a severance package of 1 year's salary should the company terminate me without cause during that period. And finally, immediate reinstatement of Rachel Bennett to the compliance department as my deputy with support for her to complete her certification training. I folded my hands on the table, having laid out my terms clearly and confidently. The room was silent for a moment. Then Diana turned to the other board members. We need to discuss these terms privately. Miss Wilson, would you mind stepping outside for a few minutes? I nodded and left the room, closing the door behind me. In the hallway, I took several deep breaths. My heart was racing, but I felt strangely calm. For the first time since my termination, I was in control of the situation. Thomas appeared at the end of the hallway, his expression questioning. I gave him a small thumbs up. After about 15 minutes, the boardroom door opened, and Diana invited me back in. The atmosphere had changed noticeably. Richard sat silently, his expression unreadable. Several board members looked satisfied, even slightly amused. Miss Wilson, Diana began. The board has voted to accept all of your conditions with one modification. We're prepared to offer you the position of Vice President of Regulatory Compliance with the attendant increase in salary and benefits. This would be a new executive position reporting directly to the board. Would that be acceptable to you? I felt a surge of triumph, but kept my expression professional. That would be acceptable. Excellent, Diana said. Our legal team will draw up the necessary paperwork immediately, assuming you can begin work today. I can, I confirmed. Good, Diana said with a nod. Your first priority will be to contact the Regulatory Commission and begin the process of lifting the stop work order on MediTrack 5.0. I'll need immediate access to all certification documentation, I said. And I'll want to personally review any changes made to the software since my departure to ensure continued compliance. Of course, Diana agreed. Kevin will ensure you have everything you need. Kevin nodded quickly, looking relieved that his own position seemed secure for now. As the meeting concluded, Diana approached me privately. That was quite impressive, Miss Wilson, she said quietly. It's not often someone turns a termination into a promotion in less than 24 hours. I smiled. I'm just doing what I've always done, ensuring compliance with the rules. Indeed, Diana replied. Though I suspect Richard Parker is learning a valuable lesson about the importance of understanding regulations before dismissing them as just paperwork. As we left the boardroom, I saw Richard being pulled into a separate meeting with several board members. From their expressions, I suspected his own position might not be secure for much longer. Thomas was waiting for me in my old office, which remarkably had not yet been cleared out, so he asked eagerly. You're looking at the new Vice President of Regulatory Compliance, I replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. Thomas grinned. I knew they couldn't function without you. But Vice President, that's brilliant. The day isn't over yet, I said, settling behind my desk. We have a stop work order to address and a product to save. I picked up my phone and dialed the Healthcare Software Regulatory Commission. This is Laura Wilson, AMSCC, number 2847561. I need to speak with Commissioner Bradley regarding a status update for MediTrack 5.0. 6 weeks later, I stood at the podium in the same conference room where I had been publicly fired. The room was once again filled with Meditech employees, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Today, we were celebrating the successful launch of MediTrack 5.0, which had received regulatory approval in record time once I had resumed oversight of the certification process. I want to thank everyone who worked tirelessly to get this project back on track, I said, looking out at the faces of my colleagues. Especially the development team led by Thomas, who made the necessary adjustments to ensure full compliance without compromising functionality. Thomas gave me a thumbs up from his seat in the front row. Beside him, Rachel beamed. As promised, she had been reinstated to the compliance department and was now officially my deputy with the company fully supporting her certification training. At the back of the room stood Diana Roberts and several board members who had taken a much more active role in company operations since the crisis. Notably absent was Richard Parker, who had been asked to resign just 2 weeks after my reinstatement. The official reason given was strategic differences with the board regarding regulatory compliance priorities. As I concluded my remarks and stepped away from the podium, the room erupted in applause. It was a sweet moment of vindication, but more importantly, it represented the beginning of a new chapter for both me and Meditech. The following days and weeks brought significant changes to the company culture. With my new position reporting directly to the board, compliance was no longer treated as an afterthought, but as a core component of product development. I instituted regular training sessions for all departments on regulatory requirements, ensuring everyone understood the importance of the work we did. The board appointed a new CEO, Martin Reynolds, who had extensive experience in healthcare technology and understood the complex regulatory environment. In our first meeting, he made his position clear: I never want to experience a $101,000 per hour crisis due to compliance issues. Your department has my full support. True to the agreement, Richard had issued a company-wide apology before his departure, acknowledging the error in judgment regarding my termination. The email was carefully worded, clearly crafted by the legal department, but it went a long way toward restoring my professional reputation within the company. On a personal level, the experience had been transformative. The initial shock and humiliation of being publicly fired had given way to a newfound confidence. I had stood my ground, advocated for my value, and emerged stronger than before. One evening, about 6 months after the incident, Jessica and I met for dinner to celebrate her promotion to finance director. "I still can't believe how everything turned out," she said, as we toasted our respective successes. "When you called me after being fired, I was ready to help you file for unemployment. Instead, you ended up with a VP title and a corner office." I laughed. Trust me, that wasn't the outcome I expected either. But it taught me something important about knowing your value and standing up for yourself. "The company learned something too," Jessica observed. "I've noticed how differently the executive team treats specialists now. There's a new respect for expertise that wasn't there before." She was right. One of my first initiatives as VP had been to create a comprehensive map of critical certifications and specialized knowledge within the company. The board now received quarterly updates on these essential personnel to ensure that institutional knowledge was properly recognized and protected. Rachel had flourished in her new role, advancing through her certification training faster than expected. "You're going to put me out of a job," I teased her during one of our mentoring sessions. "Never," she replied seriously. "But I want to be ready to step up if you move even higher in the company." The most satisfying moment came when Meditrack 5.0 received a Patient Safety Innovation Award from a national healthcare association. The technology was already helping hospitals reduce medication errors by over 40%, potentially saving countless lives. That, after all, was why compliance mattered so much, not because of bureaucratic rules, but because real patients depended on our software working correctly. As I accepted the award on behalf of Meditech, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey. From the shock of public humiliation to the triumph of professional vindication, the experience had taught me invaluable lessons. First, expertise and specialized knowledge have real value, even when others fail to recognize it. Never doubt your worth or the importance of your contributions. Second, following the rules isn't just about checking boxes. It's about upholding standards that protect people and ensure quality. My commitment to proper procedures had ultimately saved both my career and the company's flagship product. Third, sometimes the greatest opportunities arise from the darkest moments. Had I not been fired, I might never have advanced to an executive position where I could influence company policy more broadly. And finally, standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean seeking revenge. By focusing on solutions rather than retribution, I had turned an adversarial situation into a win for everyone involved. These days, when I mentor young professionals entering the compliance field, I share my story as an example of why technical expertise matters and why one should never compromise on professional ethics. Your knowledge is your power, I tell them. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The experience changed me in other ways too. I became more attuned to office politics, more strategic in documenting important communications, and more confident in advocating for myself and my team. These skills proved as valuable as my technical certification in navigating corporate life. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for Richard Parker's misguided decision to terminate me so abruptly. It led to a much stronger position for compliance within Meditech and a much better career trajectory for me personally. Have you ever found yourself undervalued at work only to discover your true worth when a crisis hit? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this corporate redemption story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more professional insights and experiences. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might be struggling to have their expertise recognized in the workplace. Remember, sometimes knowing your value and standing your ground can turn a devastating setback into your greatest professional triumph. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.